Well, it's all happening in the cricketing world at the moment. Pakistan won their one innings game against India after bowling them out for 266 and declaring it a subpar score. Afghanistan showed some great cricketing skills, almost chasing down Sri Lanka's score in 37 overs to go through to the final four. Unfortunately, their counting skills weren't so great. We witnessed Nepal get bashed around for a week and a half, looking like a younger brother who just broke their older brother's toy. Then we even got to witness Australia sneak a few wins in, with Marsh deciding he wants to play the World Cup all of a sudden and drops into the team and scores an 80 and 100. And even England are in the middle of a tight series at the moment. There is so much cricket on right now, but really all the eyes are on one thing, and that is the Asia Cup and how many times can Pakistan play India in a 3-week period. So let's start off with India's dominance in the Asia Cup, or do we just call it the Flash Flooding Cup? Because it really depends on which you prefer. I wasted 2 nights staying up, ruining my sleep schedule just to take my eyes off the screen for a second, and I come back and the entire field is covered in plastic. It is not the pitch, the entire field is covered. Now, I don't know if Solar Panel Pat might have a couple of words to say about the sustainability of covering an entire field. I've actually never seen it before. And you know what the funniest part was? It did absolutely nothing. They covered the entire field in hopes that they'll get back on the ground, and really, it just started pooling in between. Where the covers overlapped, it just started pooling in between. Another thing that I really didn't have any idea about was their 2-day one-dayers. The first day of the India-Pakistan ODI was washed out. I was starting to script a wrap-up for that India-Pakistan game when I turned on my TV the following night, and turns out they're actually continuing it. So luckily I avoided the online embarrassment and I sat down to watch India-Pakistan. I wanted to see the completed game, see how it played out without any rain. Of course, half an hour later, they're all off again, and the reserve day ends up being half washed out. I mean, I'm not much of a logistical guy, but playing an Asia Cup in the middle of Sri Lanka during their wet season may not have been the smartest idea. It's lucky they did have the reserve day, but now I'm actually going to start calling for the reserve day, because had it rained for a little bit longer, they couldn't have completed that match. So maybe we got to start looking into 3-day one-dayers. But in between all of the rain, there actually was a completed cricket game, and it was a complete riot. It's gonna feel weird saying this, but India were completely dominant over the 2-day one-dayer. It was just one of those games that start to finish completely one-sided, and Pakistan didn't even get a sniff. And this actually came as a complete shock to me. Not just because they played so well in that first game against India where it was washed out, but they have looked so strong for quite a while now, especially their pace attack. So to see that they could only manage 2 wickets across the entire Indian innings came as a big shock to me. Obviously, you do have to factor in that Pakistan lost Haris Rauf early on, so I'm sure that did play a part somewhat, but really you just have to give credit to India. And a lot of that credit can go to King Kohli. I've been dying to get him in one of the videos to get the views up, but you can't deny how good he is. I mean, Kohli again proved why he's probably one of the best short form players to ever touch the game, because he was just dominant from start to finish. From ball 1 to ball 94, he looked so good and he looked so comfortable, and he really just played classic. There was nothing extra, there was no lap sweeps, there was no switch hitting over cover. It was all classic cricket shots. It was turning over the strike regularly, and it was just beautiful to watch. I mean, Pakistan were getting so frustrated, they really could not do anything. Even at the end, when Kohli put the pressure on and started really attacking the bowlers, they just had absolutely no answer. It's one of those moments when you see Kohli in that kind of form, it's one where you just got to sit there and kind of accept that you're going to get belted. When he's in that mood, when he has that stern and displeased look in his face, when he's getting angry at himself after every shot, that's when you know you're probably There was actually a ball, I think he was on 98 runs, and he creamed a ball. It's not like he really mishit the ball, but he creamed a ball to the fielder for a single, and obviously he wanted to hit the boundary. He wanted to miss a fielder, score the boundary, hit 100. But the way he reacted when he didn't even miss it. The way he reacted when he creamed it to a fielder, he was so angry with himself. He was swearing under his breath. He was whacking himself with the bat. And I was just sitting there like, if I was ever in that situation, I guess first of all, I never would be. I'd never get close to 98 runs. But if I was in that situation and I hit a really good ball to the boundary flying and only got a single off it, I would probably be chuffed with myself, or so nervous to the point where I wouldn't even be able to be really angry with myself. But Kohli is just that obsessed with always doing better, always being better. He's never perfect. And I think that's just one of the attributes that makes him so good. He may come across stern and angry, but it's what makes him so good. And this game was just another example of King Kohli absolutely dominating, and there's nothing you can do about it. And as much as I could sit here and talk about Kohli's innings, as much as I want to walk you through ball by ball how good he was, I'm not going to. And we also have to give credit to the other Indian players. Rahul in particular was literally running drinks 5 minutes before the game he got called into the side. He's had so much slack against him over the last few years. He's been in and out of both the Test, the ODI side. They were saying he's going to be a shoo-in to wicket keep for the World Cup. Then Ishan Kishan arrives on the scene. But he's just come in 5 minutes before the game, didn't even know he was playing, and scored 111 not out. He put on 233 runs with Kohli. The only people who probably aren't happy to see how good of form he is the selectors, because they now have a massive problem. Kishan has been absolutely unreal, especially in the West Indies series. I thought he was so good. But Rahul has an outstanding ODI record. I think he averages just a touch under 50, and now has obviously come in and scored 100, then was the second highest scorer in the Sri Lanka game. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do for the World Cup. Are they going to stick with Rahul? Are they going to have Kishan keep? Are they going to make room and try to sneak both of them into the side? It's going to be interesting. I want to see what they do for the rest of the Asia Cup and going into the World Cup, because they just look so good at the moment. They've got almost too much depth in their squad. I guess at the end of the day, though, it's probably not the worst problem to have, is it? Now, before I move on to the Sri Lanka game, I have to mention this. Bumrah's opening spell against Pakistan was one of the scariest, but also one of the most accurate spells I've ever seen. He was bowling absolute wheels. He was putting it on a spot. The ball was swinging everywhere. The ball was also skidding on everywhere. It looked like an absolute horrible time to be out there batting. And you could actually tell that, because every time the camera cut to one of the Pakistani openers, they were not about it. They did not want to be here. The light wasn't great. Bumrah was absolutely bowling as good as you can bowl. You could tell it was a terrible time to bat, and they did not want to be there. And I guess in the end their wish kind of came true, because most of them weren't there for very long. So India played Sri Lanka the following day, and the game was unreal. You would have thought the rivalry of Pakistan and India kind of would have overshadowed this game, but I was so invested in it. It was such a stark contrast from the game just 24 hours earlier. The pitch was really difficult to bat on. It was spinning a mile as well. I thought India started really well, very similar to the Pakistan game, opened up well, but all of a sudden, in comes this 20-year-old WELLAGE, whose name I'm absolutely pronouncing wrong, but he starts bowling a mix of prime Murali with a bit of Shane Warne spun in there, and bowled probably, I'm not even joking, one of the most dangerous spells in one-day cricket I have ever seen. And it may have looked more impressive considering the fact that the Indian batsman had literally turned up probably 16 hours prior to this game. But either way, he completely ripped through the Indian order, and almost every single ball he bowled, it looked like he was going to get a wicket. It was vicious. I don't think I've ever used the word vicious when I've been talking about watching off spin, but it was vicious. It was dangerous. Every ball was on the spot, and India just looked like they had no clue. And I was just absolutely amazed by it. The 9th wicket fell as I was trying to write a funny tweet about the 8th wicket falling. And at this point, I think Sri Lanka are just going to absolutely dominate. There's no way they lose this game. They've just skittled India for really cheap. They've been in great form. They take this game. But stupidly, I forgot how cricket works. I forgot that there are two sides to a game. Once one team bats, another team comes in and bats. That's how cricket works. I actually completely forgot that. And I probably should have considered this before declaring Sri Lanka as winners to this game. Because funnily enough, the team that scored almost 400 the day before and had 2 tons only lost 2 wickets. Funnily enough, if they're struggling to bat on a pitch, maybe it's not just because Sri Lanka are one of the best teams in the world, bowling amazing spin. Maybe the pitch actually does have something to do with it. And you know what? It turned out that way. Because would you believe it, the team that scored 400 actually didn't turn into horrible players overnight, or they didn't all have a terrible game on the same game. It actually does turn out that a pitch with bad light, seam movement, and the ball swinging an absolute mile is going to be hard for both teams to bat on. And that was pretty evident from the first ball, as Sri Lanka pretty much started losing wickets from the second over and continually throughout the whole game. Despite a little bit of a fight back from De Silva and also this wonder kid WELLAGE, who thought, you know, taking 5 wickets at 20 years old in an international match against some of the best batsmen of all time isn't enough. I'm actually just going to come in and score 40 off 40, look really good while doing it, and end up with not out. He may have had one of the best games in one-day cricket. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. Obviously, apart from the fact that they fell short and lost the game. But I tell you what a game for WELLAGE. God, I am saying that name so wrong, aren't I? And before I get myself too carried away, because I do love a good off-spinning delivery, but I have to also talk about another certain spinner, and this time on the Indian team, a leg spinner, and that is Kuldeep Yadav. Now, I just want to go on a quick stat dive into Yadav, because he has got to be one of the most underrated bowlers in the world. So listen to this, right? In test matches, he averages 21 from 14 innings, but obviously can't get a game. I mean, it's pretty hard when you have 2 of the best spinners in the world ahead of him. But he averages 21 from 14 innings. Then if you look at his ODIs, he averages 25 from 85 innings, going at only 5 runs per over. And as a leg spinner, often you bowl very attacking, you get sent for a lot of runs. He's still only going at 5s per over while averaging 25. Then you look at his T20 stats. I mean, he averages 14 from 31 games. 31 games, and he averages 14, striking every 13 balls. This guy is an absolute freak in short form. And if he didn't have such good off spinners ahead of him in the test team, he probably would go on to have a great test career as well. I mean, this guy's 28. He's so good. I think he's going to be a massive part of India's run this World Cup, especially with the World Cup being in India. I think Yadav is such a good player. They will deservedly go in as favourite for the Asia Cup final. And let's see how we go. Will we get to see a 4th day of Pakistan versus India? Now, just before I leave the chaos of the Asia Cup behind, I need to quickly touch on the Afghanistan versus Sri Lanka game. Because what the we are talking about the highest level of cricket, international cricket. It may not be the most important tournament in the world, but you know what? At this stage, it probably holds the same amount of weight as the World Test Championship. But either way, international cricket in a knockout game, in a sport that is built upon stats, in a sport unlike any other where fans will know their favourite players' stats, their average, their economy, their strike rate, a game that is full of stats, and you're telling me that Afghanistan's players or coaches didn't know that they could qualify. I completely understand the complexity of net run rate, or actually rather, I completely misunderstand the complexity of net run rate, but that's why we have technology. That's why technology is used in cricket. I just don't understand how it's possible for a team to still be able to qualify, yet have no idea that they can qualify. Are you really telling me that the match officials or even the coaches in Afghanistan couldn't have told their players, hang on a minute, you've got 3 balls to hit a 6, get going? I mean, regardless of all the drama, it was a great match, and Afghanistan did a great job to even bring it that close, to even chase it in 37 overs. But as a fan, I would be absolutely fuming, especially watching Faruqi play 2 forward defenses to the 2 balls that need to go for 6, and then the final ball that they can qualify, he gets done LBW, again going for a forward defense. It would be infuriating to be an Afghanistan fan. I feel terrible for him. But I just wonder, surely in this day and age, players cannot not know that they can qualify. Okay, so let's hop continents quickly, and we're going to go over to Africa, where the Aussies have been taking full advantage of the of the concrete slabs that they've been calling pitches. Australia won the T20s 3-0, and they're currently 2-1 up in the one days, and with the introduction of Bison Ball, which is essentially just playing exactly how we normally would on a road, but if we do end up with an above par score, it's called Bison Ball, and we're just reinventing the wheel. But all jokes aside, the Bison, or you can call him Mitch Marsh, I guess if you're not that close with him, you can call him Mitch Marsh. But the Bison has continued to do his best Don Bradman impressions, and he's just scoring runs for absolute fun at the moment. This year alone, he's averaging 70 across all 3 formats, and besides maybe Khawaja in test matches, looked the best batsman from Australia in all three formats. And it's not often that I get on a hype train or I really cheer an individual rather than the team as a collective. But Mitch Marsh is a player that I'm so happy is doing well. He's always been a great bloke. Obviously, a lot of people were joking when he got included for the 2023 Ashes, just to have him because he is such a top bloke. He's so good for morale. But to see him do really well makes me so happy. Obviously, Mitch Marsh was an absolute punching bag for Australian media, Australian fans for years, along with his brother. And obviously, his form was not that good. But first of all, that's the selector's job to not choose him. He's just going out there and doing the best job he can. But for him to cop stick from his own fans at the top of his bowling mark when he's running into bowl, I think is disgusting. And I think his treatment was really brutal. Obviously, it got to a point where his form was quite bad and he ended up getting dropped. He ended up not even getting a Cricket Australia contract at one point, I think in 2018. But since getting his contract cut, his short form has been really good, but especially in the last year, he's just been outstanding in every form and has actually got himself to a point where he's probably going to be captaining Australia for the T20 World Cup next year. He has done that good. He might even be looking at taking Cam Green's spot in the meantime. I mean, his form has just been unreal. I'm so happy for him. I'm also really interested to see where he goes from here. I wonder if he's going to try do a little Steve Smith and convert himself into a full-time batsman. He seems to pick up injuries when he bowls. And not saying his bowling's bad, but at this point, it might even be worth just converting to a full-time batsman and focusing on that. But whatever he's doing at the moment, he's doing something right. And I'm all for it. I'm all for the Bison scoring runs, and I love to see it. Another two players that I've been really impressed by is David Warner and Marnus Labuschagne. Now, I'm a big believer in basing form off whatever format they're playing. So if you get out first ball in a T20, I don't reckon you can be screamed at saying he can never play test because he throws his wicket away. I think you got to base form off the format that you're playing. And David Warner does really well in the shorter forms. I think he still has a lot to offer, and this series has just been another example of that. Yes, I don't really think he should be in the test side any longer. I think it's time to bring some younger blood in, but he still has a lot to offer in the shorter forms, and I think he needs to be selected based off his form in the shorter form, and he's showing that he can still be a good player for maybe another couple of years. But then I also got to eat a little bit of humble pie with Marnus Labuschagne, because he is a player that I thought, although he's obviously amazing, especially in test matches, I thought his form in the one-day side probably doesn't warrant him to be ahead of some other players. I thought he often was getting tired down a little bit and was struggling to score runs at the pace he liked. It looked like he was really trying to force some shots and end up getting out cheaply or stupidly, but he has just completely proved me wrong. He has batted beautifully this series and has done a really good job of keeping that strike rate up, whether it be tickling along singles or even hitting boundaries. He seems a lot more confident to take on bowlers and hit over the ring, hit over the fielders, and score runs at that faster pace. And that's the biggest difference I've noticed from him this series compared to a couple of series ago, is he's scoring a lot more freely and he's been able to bat at his own pace. And if he's able to do that, then he very well could be going to the World Cup and be starting in the World Cup. But overall, it's all been really interesting. I've never been a massive one-day fan. I think overall, test matches are able to build suspense over 5 days that you just cannot replicate in shorter formats. But this Asia Cup and the two series on at the moment has me fully invested. It's really entertaining cricket, a lot of suspenseful games, a lot of games on the knife edge like the Afghanistan game, even the India-Sri Lanka game, although the scoreline wasn't that close in the end, was a really close game. And now I just cannot wait for this World Cup to start. But first, we have an Asia Cup final to watch. And the big question on everyone's mind is, will we get to see Pakistan, India for a fourth time? I'll see you all in a couple of days.